of how innovation works. So once again, last week we talked about what is innovation, and today we'll be talking about biology as being the paradigm, and in particular evolution as the paradigm for innovation, whether it be in business, in your personal lives, or whatever. So in evolution, as we'll talk about, there are three elements that are critical to evolution, to innovation and evolution. And those are the ability to pass information along, to transmit the information about the ideas or whatever. And of course, in biology, that's the DNA and the genetics, to pass along the information. The second element, of course, we will develop these in more detail during the lecture. The second element is variability. In other words, the organisms in a species, in living organisms, they have some variability. They have different characteristics, different genetics, etc. And that variability represents different possible innovations or inventions. And then the third element in evolution is what we call fitness, differential fitness. And that means that as those different individuals interact with the environment, some genetic characteristics work well with the environment and others don't work as well. And so we call that differential fitness in the environment. So those three elements, transmissibility or hereditability of information, variability of the characteristics, and fitness, differential fitness with the environment, is a powerful paradigm for innovation. It is how evolution works and ultimately how innovation works. So if we look at this competition that we saw this morning with the world, the Entrepreneurship World Cup, we saw the transmissibility, the people sharing the information, and the presentation, etc. It's not just an idea inside the head, it's actually being transmitted. We saw different ideas. We saw 3 presentations, and of course there were more for the whole competition, but during our class we saw three presentations, and they all had different answers to different problems. And then we saw the judging and the environment, and of course the ultimate environment is the market. There were some winners and there were some not winners, and that's a differential fitness. And then that process continues, and ultimately innovation is created. The best ideas are selected, and those are propagated and spread out through the society, just like innovation works. So that is the framework for evolution. That's the framework for innovation. And that's why we start with this topic in this class. So this class is about biology, or this particular lecture is about biology. And it's very relevant, actually, to business and to innovation more generally. So let's begin. Give an example of innovation in biology. So all of you completed the assignment. Some of you want to share what your thoughts are or what you submitted? We're not going to go through all 40 students, but some of you can share what you found.
Professor, let me share my example.
Okay.
So basically,
Speak a little louder.
Yeah, is it okay?
Yeah.
So I wrote about the vaccine for disease that is just a simple flu, because it was the vaccine was founded in 1938 in the United States. It's against the influenza, so it was the best turnout in the biology, in innovation in biology. I think it can be the best example for this question.
Great. That's a good example about development of vaccines as an innovation. it's involving biology, but actually it's involving a business, but it's using biology as an innovation. Any other answers people came up with?
Yeah, for example, I mentioned DNA sequencing.
Okay,
And
when you answer a question, also turn on your camera too.
yeah, just a second. So I mentioned DNA sequencing. The dengue vaccine. That's a vaccine to fight a mosquito-borne tropical disease, which is widely
Yes.
spread in Asia and America. And I think DNA sequencing also contributed to the minimizing the spread of this disease, because nowadays, for example, in Singapore, they've created a new species of mosquitoes which cannot breed, which means
Yes.
that it is also contributing to the development of the world, and maybe no contact thermometer, which I think now is very popular due to the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Neladina. Any other contribution? Anyone else want to come up with an idea?
Professor,
Yeah.
sorry. One more thing. I was thinking about one more innovation. The plastic surgery, does it count as a biological innovation, or just is it
Well, when I
medical?
was talking about innovations in biology, both of you gave very good examples, but actually I was thinking, and this is not right or wrong, these are more discussion questions. I was actually thinking less about technology in science that has a biological aspect. I was thinking about innovation in biology, like how organisms develop capabilities to meet environmental challenges. So, for example, a giraffe having a long neck so it can get leaves from the top of the trees. That's an innovation. Uh, Elephants with the long nose that they can pick up food from difficult areas to reach, etc. So these are kind of biological innovations. Anyone have any examples like this?
But Professor, I think we misunderstood the question, because the things that you have mentioned are this natural.
Yes, so
They are not some. Yeah.
natural biological innovations.
Um, so I thought about, when we talk about innovation, I thought that there is something that human made.
Yes,
That
so
is.
this is very important. I don't want you to think about just human-made innovation. We're trying to broaden the perspective. And there's a reason why, at the end of today's lecture, not thinking about human-made innovation is important. So for today's lecture, I don't want you to think about human-made innovation. I want you to think about evolutionarily made innovation. This is very important, actually, message of the lecture is that if you want to innovate, truly innovate, you actually have to think outside the box. Everybody says think outside the box, but guess what? Very few people actually think outside the box. And maybe I'm being harsh, but that's the reality. And so we have to train ourselves if we want to be innovative. The title of this course is Management of Creativity for Innovation, right? It's management course. But if we want to manage innovation, manage creativity, we tell our employees, we tell ourselves to think outside the box. So we're doing a business, so we're only going to think about business. Well, that's not thinking outside the box. So I want you to think of not human-made innovation in biology, but biology-made innovation in biology.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, no.
Can we consider like the transition to bipedialism for humans as an innovation in technology, since it permits humans to develop a lot of things like the use of hands, and also indirectly for the brains to develop, and to it it was like every humans is walking just on two legs, and so it's something
Yeah,
that's
so
pretty common.
human beings being able to walk bipedal, bipedal means walk on two legs, and use their hands separately was very important innovation that allowed humans then to make tools and use a mouse. If we're walking on four legs, we can't use the mouse, right? So that's the kind of innovation that I'm thinking about. Biological innovation.
Then I'm not sure if this is also part of the one that you're talking about, the innovation in biology, but like eyelashes, like to can that be also an innovation in biology that you're talking? Because eyelashes
Okay.
are
Yeah,
like,
explain.
so if they don't have, if human being they don't have the eyelashes, like all the dust or maybe the sweat's going directly to the eyes. That's what I
Yeah.
know. So is
So
that
that's a
also one of
kind of innovation.
Yeah, of course.
Eyelashes.
Even your nails are innovation by nature, because
yeah.
if you don't have nails, your fingers will be rubbed off.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
so those are all examples. So there are many, many examples of innovation, actually, if you think outside the box. So that's very interesting. I was trying to push you to think innovatively, and you didn't make a mistake, but if you only think about human-made technology that's related to biology, you don't come up with many things. You come up with vaccine, you come up with DNA sequencing. These are all good answers. But actually, your world is limited. But if you think about all the biology from eyelashes to fingernails and from walking on two legs, your world of new ideas vastly expands. That was actually the message of today's lecture. I suspect,
Professor,
all of you are business students. You're not biology students. So you're sitting there, why do I have to think about biology? Well, I'll be very honest with you. If you are serious about innovation, and that is your passion to be innovative, and you tell me I'm not interested in biology, then you should not be in this class. Go to another class, do your focus thing, and you can forget about innovation for your life. I mean, everyone is innovative a little bit, but if you want to be the next Steve Jobs or you want to be the next, innovator like Dan Cohen, you have to think very broadly like this about many different ideas. And if you only think about one way and you're thinking in the box, you're not going to be innovative. So if you're saying, I don't want to learn about biology, I didn't sign up for this, then drop the class. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm just speaking, right? But that's the point. We have to think outside the box. What does it mean to think outside the box? Well, this course, this lecture in particular, is about thinking outside the box.
So, Professor, I think your statements remind me one thing. I watched a video about Japanese train that the CEO or the engineer of this Shinkansen train, the fast train, bullet train. There was I think that at the beginning of this innovation, I mean, the train launched, there was a problem with the voice when the train crossed the tunnel. After that, there was a huge and very loud noise, which annoyed the people who live next to the train station. And the engineer of this train is come up with one idea to change the train front of the train, I mean the
shape.
nose, yeah, the shape, into some bird's nose. I mean the point,
the beak.
Yeah, peak of the bird. So
yes.
it dramatically changed the, I mean, reduced the voice. I remember this video.
Yes.
When I
So actually, during this discussion, we basically got to the final point of the lecture. And the final point of the lecture, which we will, we'll go through the lecture quickly because time is going. But the final point of the lecture is about the concept of bio-inspired innovation. And what bio-inspired innovation is, that we use examples from biology to develop a new product or a new idea. Exactly what you mentioned about the Shinkansen high-speed Japanese train. They used an example from the bird shape to redesign the train shape to mitigate or cancel that unacceptable or irritating sound. That is a perfect example. And why is biology so important? Why don't we use chemistry or physics or whatever? Because embedded deep into biology is the process of innovation. So if you look at biology and all these things, from the giraffes to the eyelashes to the birds and all this, you will see so many examples of innovation, because that is the essence of life, that if you're a train engineer, you will make a great train. Does it make sense? That's why I say, and I don't want to sound harsh, but if you're in this innovation class, 40 students, and you say, I don't want to know about biology, I'm not interested in biology, I'm a business person, and you have that attitude, in Korean we call that taedo, then I don't think you really belong in this class. There may be other classes that are better. And again, I don't want to be harsh, but this is the reality. So you have to ask yourself, am I really interested in innovation? Then I have to be thinking outside the box like this. And this is not just theoretical. As Mahmoud John mentioned, there are perfectly real examples, and we'll go over more examples like that here. So this very good discussion. Let's continue quickly through the lecture. Any other points?
I share the link of YouTube link if you want to watch about this train.
Professor?
Great. Yeah, so everybody, actually, that's a very good idea. After the class, actually, let's, how long is the YouTube?
Grammarly does more than catch errors. With Grammarly, you can...
In 1989, Japan's Shinkansen bullet train had a
Okay, let's actually watch this YouTube video. I think it's a very good example.
problem. It was fast, really fast, like pushing 170 miles per hour fast. But every time it exited a tunnel, it was loud. The noise was coming from a variety of sources, but whenever a train sped into a tunnel, it pushed waves of atmospheric pressure through the other end. The air exited tunnels with a sonic boom that could be heard 400 meters away. In dense residential areas, that was a huge problem. So an engineering team was brought in to design a quieter, faster, and more efficient train, and they had one secret weapon. Eiji Nakatsu, the general manager of the technical development department, was a bird watcher.
Different components of the redesigned bullet train were based on different birds. Owls inspired the pantograph. That's the rig that connects the train to the electric wires above. Nakatsu modeled the redesign after their feathers, reducing noise by using the same serrations and curvature that allow them to silently swoop down to catch prey. The Adelie penguin, whose smooth body allows it to swim and slide effortlessly, inspired the pantograph's supporting shaft, redesigned for lower wind resistance. And perhaps most notable of all was the kingfisher.
The kingfisher is a bird that dives into water to catch its prey. The unique shape of its beak allows it to do that while barely making a splash. Nakatsu took that shape to the design table. The team shot bullets shaped like different train nose models down a pipe to measure pressure waves and dropped them into water to measure the splash size. The quietest nose design was the one modeled most closely after the kingfisher's beak. When the redesign debuted in 1997, it was 10% faster, used 15% less electricity, and stayed under the 70 decibel noise limit in residential areas. And it did all that with the wings of an owl, the belly of a penguin, and the nose of a kingfisher. The kingfisher is a bird that dives into water to catch its prey. The unique shape of its beak allows it to do that while barely making a splash. Nakatsu took that shape to the design table. The team shot bullets shaped like different train nose models down a pipe to measure pressure waves and dropped them into water to measure the splash size. The quietest nose design was the one modeled most closely after the kingfisher's beak. When the redesign debuted in 1997, it was 10% faster, used 15% less electricity, and stayed under the 70 decibel noise limit in residential areas. And it did all that with the wings of an owl, the belly of a penguin, and the nose of a kingfisher. There's a name for design like this. It's called biomimicry.
The people who design our world usually never take a biology class, believe it or not. So they're novices in how the world works.
That's Janine Benyus. Back in 1997, she wrote the book that coined the term biomimicry. It told the story of the innovations in computing, energy, and health that were inspired by structures in the natural world.
Stick like a gecko, compute like a cell, even run a business like a redwood forest.
Benyus has since worked as a consultant for various companies, trying to get them to understand how to take design ideas from nature. That might mean studying prairie dog burrows to build better air ventilation systems, mimicking shark skin to create bacteria-resistant plastic surfaces for hospitals, or arranging wind turbines in the same drag-reducing pattern that schools of fish swim in. Designers get inspiration from a lot of different places, but Benyus thinks many of them could benefit from looking more at the natural world.
So there's a lot of sort of looking at what other people have done, and what they do is they look at all the others and they get ideas. They literally do, you know, a lot of designers have lots of magazines that they look through. They tear those out and they put them on inspiration boards. But they're looking at other human technologies.
Her idea was simple. Designers should get in the habit of bringing a biologist to the table and let them help solve problems by mimicking nature. And there are three main ways they can do that.
You know, you can mimic its form or its shape. You might create a paint for a building that when it dries, it's got the same structure as self-cleaning leaves. Lotus leaves are notoriously great. They let rainwater clean the leaf because they have these bumps, and the rainwater balls up on the bumps and then it pearls away the dirt.
This is related to flight.
So that lotus effect is physical, and you can create a physical
like
structure on the outside of any product. Imagine that on the outside of your car. Rainwater would clean your car. So that's mimicking form. But there's also mimicking process. The processes in the natural world. It might even be, you know, how you mimic how ants communicate in order to efficiently find sources of food or new places to live. And those processes, that self-organization, has been mimicked in software. You know, in things like autonomous cars and how they're going to move in flocks through the city by talking to one another. That's mimicking nature's process. And then you jump up to the level of mimicking whole ecosystems. Right? There's a thing called, that's a buzzword right now that's really hot, called the circular economy, which is essentially, you know, industry saying, you know, there should be no such thing as a byproduct in our manufacturing facility that goes to landfill. It should be used by something else, right? And at the end of a product's life, that product should be upcycled into something else. It's being called the circular economy. Ecosystems do that really, really, really well. You've got a log on the forest floor, and those materials move up into the body of the fungus that eats it. Those materials move up into a mouse, and that mouse material moves up into a hawk, right? And if you think about that as what we'd like to do with local materials being upcycled constantly in our cities, for instance, those ecosystem lessons are really big for us.
And that's the end goal for biomimetic design, making products, systems, and cities functionally indistinguishable from the natural world. Life has been around on Earth for 3.8 billion years, and what designers are starting to realize is that is a lot of research and development time.
The people who design our world have a lot to learn from the natural world. All they have to do is take a look.
Thank you so much for watching. This is one of a series of videos that we're doing in collaboration with 99% Invisible. They are a podcast that does stories all about design. We loved working with them. You should definitely
Okay, so that was very good. Thank you very much, Mutmajon, for sharing that. As you can see, I like to be open-minded. So instead of just giving the lecture and saying, let's just go straight ahead with my plan, I sensed that this video was very good. I saw it was short, and I showed it. The flexibility, thinking outside the box. So I try to think outside the box. I try to provide that example and modify things, just like evolution. So we modified the lecture. I thought that was very good example. So thanks for sharing that. So that's exactly what I mean by examples in biology. That's why this is, after the overview, the first lecture of this class, because that's an extremely important lesson. I don't think you all need to be professional biologists, of course, and this lecture is not going to give you a PhD in biology, but we want to be aware of these ideas and thinking about them. So I'll do a very quick review about innovation is invention and the commercialization. You saw really good examples of that in the pitches this morning. We talked the last time about the difference between invention, cool ideas, and innovation, bringing it to the market. Invention is usually one individual, it's outside of reality, and innovation is typically a group, and it brings things into reality, very much connected to reality. We were talking with Dan about negative feedback, because Nelidina, was asking about, people rejecting and the negative side. And I emphasize that that is really good, because evolution occurs with this differential fitness. And when you get that feedback, you become better. And I can tell you that presentation was really good, but it doesn't really good just because he shows up and gives it. He's given it hundreds of times, getting criticism. It's evolved into this very good presentation. We talked about product innovation, process innovation, and we gave the example of the MP3. And the MP3 was supplanted by the iPod because of process innovation, and in particular the iTunes, making it very easy for people to use the MP3 player. Whereas the original product, which was the original technology, didn't really engage with the customers in a comfortable way. And this is where we were also talking with Dan about customers being really important. You get information from the customers, you improve your product, again, evolution. And this iPod wasn't just Steve Jobs coming up with the idea one day. It was constant testing, constant discussion, and the evolutionary process. Evolution is central to innovation. And so one reason we study the biology is there are two reasons. One is what you saw on the video, to get inspired by biology, biomimetic design, to be inspired by biology. The other reason to study it is to understand the process of evolution, how evolution works, so that you can do your own process of evolution. You're not going to live for, 1 billion years. Life has been on Earth for 1 billion years. So you're not going to live for 1 billion years. So you don't have all that time to evolve and innovate. So, but during your lifetime, which is very short compared to all that, you can make good methods to innovate. That's the essence of creative management for innovation. And the best method is this evolutionary method. We talked about disruptive versus incremental innovation. And disruptive innovation is a low cost and new market innovation. So flight is an example of disruptive innovation, not because it's strange or radical or new or whatever, but if you have an airplane or you have a solar panel, it has a surface on it, a surface put on there to prevent rust, that surface to prevent icing or whatever. And basically it's like paint, some surface. But as Dan mentioned, those surfaces, the extra covering, will get rusty, will break apart, will create environmental damage. It's an extra piece on top of your machine or device or whatever. Instead of making a surface, adding on, he does a laser patterning, which changes the existing shape or surface of that shape without putting an extra coating. So the surface is changed, but we don't need the coating. So we don't need extra material. It's potentially lower cost and has much more benefits. And we gave the example of the transistor versus the vacuum tube. So that's disruptive innovation. We talked about closed innovation and open innovation. So open innovation is extremely important to get new ideas from the outside world. And so Dan is very good at that. When I told him about this class, he said, I can join the class and, answer any questions. And you might think Dan is a very nice guy. He wants to answer your questions, right? But actually, he also wants to learn from interacting with different people. Maybe with your questions, you might say something that he will think about, and it's a form of open innovation. So he's not just being a nice guy. He's also learning and innovating by interacting with 40 people. That's a kind of open innovation. Maybe he got an idea from you, and that's going to become $1 million thing. Now, he's not stealing. I mean, you didn't sign a contract or whatever, but this is part of open innovation. So he has a mindset to talk with lots of different people to get these ideas. And of course, to benefit you as well with his insights and his experience. So it's a win-win on both sides. So open innovation. We talked about traditional versus reverse innovation going from developing countries to developed. And we finally talked about organizational innovation. You saw in the video about ecosystems, about how businesses are organized, like living systems, like the cell. Maybe we need new forms of organization to innovate. So what is innovation? We talked about that last week. So now we'll go to the main part of the lecture, which is adaptation and evolution. The first is the assignment, examples of innovation in biology. So I'll go through some of them very quickly. We'll then talk about the theory of evolution. We will use this framework continuously throughout the class as a framework for the management of innovation, even though it's biology. And lastly, we'll talk about bio-inspired innovation. There are actually two words for it: mimetic design. That was the one that was in the video. Another word for it is bio-inspired innovation. That's the term I like to use. Because biomimetic means copying biology, but bio-inspired means more like thinking about biology and having a new design. So I actually like this title better, but that's okay. It's the same concept. So one of you had mentioned, I think it was, I forget who it was. Was it Laura? About no, it wasn't Laura. About the two legs.
About what? Sorry.
The two legs. I think there was another person with a French-sounding name. Who was talking about the two legs as an example of evolution?
Were you referring to?
That was Arnaud. Yeah, it's Arnaud. Sorry, I confused. I'm just many students for the first day, second day of class. Anyway, it was Arnaud, Clarisse Marie, and she mentioned about the two legs. So as we see here, there are other innovations in the human body that enabled human beings to advance and be successful. Two legs is very clear example that Arnaud told us about, being able to handle tools, to be able to walk on two legs, enabled other activities. Another one is this four-cusp molar, the tooth. So this is the incisors, these are the canines, these are the premolars, and these are the molars. Molars are in the back for chewing. And in earlier animals, these molars were very sharp, and they became bicuspid, tricuspid, and 4 cusps, like you see here. And that was a very important innovation. It looks very simple, but that innovation allowed a much more diverse diet and being able to eat more different types of food by basically grinding the food so that it can be ingested and digested. So the 4-cusp molar was a very powerful innovation for enabling humans to diversify their diet, be more efficient in getting food and energy, and not just focus on one type of food. Their innovative teeth, if you will, enabled much more success. So this is one example of innovation in biology for success. So there are 2 lessons from this. One is the actual design to allow you to eat more different types of food. The other is the concept that by diversifying your diet, you can be more successful. So diversification of your activities is a very important concept in innovation. So another example of innovation is the bone. This is a bone, and it's a hierarchical structure of these canals at the high level down to fibers, and the fibers have protein, and then they have calcium embedded in them, and it's a collagen, which is a protein, and hydroxyapatite, which is a mineral, which is like a stone. So bones are hard, but not brittle. So they're hard, but also a little bit tough and flexible. They don't break very easily. So a stone is not very flexible. It's basically a rock, right? Obviously. So bone has the characteristics of both a soft material, but also a hard material. And we call that a fiber composite. So a fiber composite are all these materials we now use for airplanes, for race cars, for skis, for other objects that need to have very strong capability, but also flexible. And so that was actually in biology. The way the bone is structured is collagen and an inorganic rock-like material, calcium, combined together, protein and calcium, to form a fiber composite. Another example of innovation is how plants defend themselves from predators. So here's a herbivore. Herbivore is a parasite that eats the plant. Here's the plant. It can have direct defenses
Professor,
against the herbivore. Yes?
you
Can you
didn't
share
share
the
the slide.
slides?
Please share
I'm
the
not
slide also.
Oh, I'm not sharing the screen.
Thank you.
Oh, God. Sorry about that. I thought it was being shared. Anyway, so we had the 4-cusp molar. Then we had bone. And now we're talking about plant defenses. Sorry about that. I thought that the share was continually going. Okay, so the plant is here, and here's the herbivore that's eating the plant. And there are 2 types of defenses. Direct defense, the plant can be taste bad. The plant can have some toxins. The plant can have some hard shell so that the herbivore doesn't eat it. And we call that a direct defense. But the plant can also create an indirect defense. It can attract predators, like insects, that will eat the herbivores. So that's a very innovative way of defending yourself. You don't just do a direct defense, you do also an indirect defense by bringing in other predators that will attack your enemy, as it were. Another example of innovation is the concept of how oxygen is used in the body. So there are 2 issues with oxygen. One is we have to get oxygen from the outside and transport it throughout the body. And the other issue is when we do activity, we have to have oxygen ready and available in the muscles to do that activity. So one is oxygen transport, and another function is oxygen storage. Oxygen transport needs a kind of protein or some sort of mechanism to bring oxygen from the outside and bind it to the carrying molecule very tightly in the lungs, but also give it up very easily when it gets to the tissues. So we need a transport function. Then the storage function has to bind oxygen very tightly and only give it up when it's very low level in the muscles. So this is curve. This is the oxygen saturation. This is the partial pressure of oxygen. The blue and the red are curves for oxygen being transported. You can see that at high oxygen pressures, it is all loaded, the saturation, the protein is loaded with oxygen. And at low oxygen pressures, it gives up the oxygen. So the saturation is very low. It gives up the oxygen. The green line is the storage function. It's basically going to be fully loaded, except at very low oxygen pressures. For example, when you're exercising very intensely, and then it gives up the oxygen. So this is myoglobin, the green one, and hemoglobin is the red and blue one. Two different proteins adapted for two different functions, transporting oxygen and storing oxygen. Another example of innovation is proteins themselves. Proteins are the building blocks of life. We have collagen as a protein, muscle proteins, enzymes, hemoglobin, myoglobin. These are all proteins. They are very strong molecules. In fact, collagen, which is in your muscles, it's in your ligaments, etc., are stronger tensile strength than stronger tensile strength than steel. How do they achieve this tensile strength? Well, a protein is made of different amino acids coming together, and they form what's called a peptide bond. So this is the peptide bond. And this peptide bond is actually stronger than a single bond, but less strong than a double bond. So it's in between both a single and a double bond. So it's very strong, but around that peptide bond, it's very flexible. So you can rotate around it. So the protein can have a shape and it can have some sort of function related to its flexibility, but it's also extremely strong and difficult to tear apart. It's like a little machine. So these are the proteins, but you can see it's a little bit flexible and vibrating like this. And this is actually my professor when I was in college, and he was one of the pioneers in this concept of protein dynamics. So imagine a machine that is extremely strong, but also very flexible like this. That's what proteins are. Another example of innovation is the golden mole. The golden mole is in the dark. It's in caves, and it has no vision. It has no eyes. It cannot see, but it can tell where other animals are, the insects, etc. And it essentially has the whole body is kind of like a hearing ear. It sticks its head into the sand and can gather the sound, and it's extremely sensitive to sound. Another example of innovation is how the body processes sugar and controls that sugar level. As you know, this is related to diabetes. So there's a hormone, also a protein, called insulin that controls how much sugar is in the blood. Insulin will cause the liver to absorb glucose, thus lowering the glucose level in the blood. And diabetics don't have enough insulin, so they need more insulin, and they have some problem producing insulin. So let's see how this works. Insulin is secreted by the pancreas. And glucose, sugar, is brought in by the digestive system in the intestines. The pancreas and the intestines both get blood supply from the arteries, from the heart, and they both drain together into the portal vein, which goes into the liver. The point of this is that the glucose going to the liver is going together with the insulin to control that glucose, and they go together at the same point in the liver. So there's a very tight control of glucose levels and insulin levels together at the liver. So there is a capillary network in the liver, and then it goes back to the heart. So you know from your basic biology that blood goes from the heart, it goes to the artery, goes to a capillary, then goes to a vein and back to the heart. But this is a different system. It's a portal circulation where you have the artery, a capillary network in the pancreas and the intestine, a vein, then another capillary network in the liver, and then another vein. We call this a portal circulation. The portal circulation is an innovation to more tightly allow for the regulation of some certain process. Here's another example of innovation, the darkling beetle that lives in the desert with extremely low no rainfall. And this beetle literally drinks water from the dry air. And it has a surface here that has these ridges. And this ridge is hydrophobic like Dan's flight, preventing the water from binding there. And then it has another channel here that is hydrophilic that attracts water. So the vapor around it coalesces, and these channels on the surface lead to the mouth, and it's literally drinking water from the dry air. Very little bit of humidity. Another example of innovation is how the body uses energy. And as you know, we talked about glucose. Glucose is a sugar, and it's the main energy source in the body. Why is glucose the main energy source? Well, if we look at how energy is processed by the body, it's basically what we call an oxidation reaction. The carbon in a reduced form is a high energy carbon, is ultimately oxidized to the lowest energy form of carbon, which is carbon dioxide. So this is a diagram of different types of biological molecules as a function of their carbon oxidation state. So the lowest energy form is carbon dioxide. The highest energy form is methane for one carbon molecule. So these are like oil is going to be in this category. Fat is in this category. And you can see that there's a progression. Carbon dioxide has the least energy. Methane or fats have the highest energy. And notice that glucose or carbohydrates is right in the middle. So glucose is a molecule that's designed to be in the middle of this energy chain. It can be used both to create or release energy, and it can be used to make more complex molecules. Of course, the highest energy form is in fats. Another interesting aspect about energy in biology is that when you burn glucose, energy is released. But in the biology, of course, we're not burning. We don't see smoke coming out of our ears. We're not on fire. So how do you extract energy from glucose? Well, you do it in very small steps. You break down the glucose in very small steps. And any of you who have studied biochemistry, you have to memorize all these steps. It's very complicated, and it looks like, why don't we just burn it? But actually, obviously burning is dangerous. It's not compatible with life. But the other interesting aspect is that in thermodynamics, the smaller the steps you do, the more efficient is your energy extraction. So an automobile engine has a thermodynamic efficiency of about 10-20%, and the rest of the energy is heat. So that's why automobile internal combustion engine creates heat. but the body has a efficiency rate of about 70-80%. And no machine made by humans and engineers approaches that level of efficiency. And that's because everything is done in a microscopic way with all these small steps. You don't need to memorize this, of course. And each small step contributes to the energy production. So the end result is we don't burn up in a ball of flame. And the second is we have very highly efficient energy production. So another example of innovation is with COVID. The virus is innovating, that it has mutated the spike protein to bind to the ACE2 that is in the lungs. It's also in the nose. It's also in the blood vessels. So it goes throughout the body. So in terms of evolution, what is the mechanism of evolution? What is the basic process of evolution that leads to this innovation? There are three elements. One is hereditability of fitness, going from genotype to phenotype. Phenotype is the expression of the genetics, so how we look, how we behave, etc. The genotype, of course, is the DNA. That phenotype is phenotypic variation. If you look at your Zoom screen, you know, people have different shapes, people have different backgrounds. Everybody is different. That's called phenotypic variation. That phenotypic variation intersects with the environment. Different traits will be better suited for different environments. There is no good or bad trait. This is extremely important in terms of ethics and philosophy, in terms of one culture being better than the other culture, or one skin color being better than another skin color. I mean, these are not scientific issues. These are now sociological issues, racism, all these things are very complex. But when we look at straight evolution, there is no value, intrinsic betterness. One person is better than another person. It all depends on the differential fitness for the environment. So it's an extremely important concept that obviously has philosophical implications. But the point is, one environment might be better for a certain trait, and that trait may be bad for another environment. We'll go a little bit quickly. Yeah?
I
Any
have
questions?
a question. Is about about innovation
Yes.
and evolutions. For example, the blue eyes. There is no. It doesn't improve in any aspect human, but it's an evolution.
Yeah, blue eyes, right.
And I was wondering if we could consider it an innovation, since it didn't brought anything to improve.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question. So blue eyes, for example, we don't see any obvious sort of benefit, but there are two aspects to some of these differential phenotypes. One is that not all differential phenotypes will have differential fitness. They may not have a very big impact on the environment or by the environment. So blue eyes may not be, so critical. So then you might say, why do people have blue eyes? Well, there are two reasons. One is that the blue eyes can be a side product of another trait. So it might be related to some other feature which does have some differential fitness. And so blue eyes are propagated, even though they are not directly selected for in evolution. The second reason is that there may be more complex reasons for that selection for blue eyes that are unrelated to what may seem to be the environment. So that could be sexual selection, cultural aspects, and group aspects related to these features. And that, in effect, is the environment as well. So you'll see a lot of examples in biology where something seems illogical or irrational, so it may not be perfect design from an environmental perspective, but it might be related to this indirect relationship to another feature. They're somehow linked, or to some sociological aspects or group aspects that select for that are different from the environmental selection. So now we go to the third topic for today, is bio-inspired innovation. Bio-inspired innovation is what we saw in the video about biomimetic innovation. So the concept of biology inspiring some innovation in design in the human world with engineers. So one example are neural networks. Neural networks are very big in artificial intelligence. So they are designed around how the nervous system works. And there's bio-inspired innovation all around the world. The Biomimicry Institute, which was the one that you saw featured in the video, but there's the Center for Nature-Inspired Engineering in London, biological robotics at the University of Tulsa, very famous Weiss Institute for Biologically Inspired Engineering, the Center for Biologically Inspired Design, and so forth, all of these centers. So for example, in Singapore, there's a soft manipulation, soft wearable robots inspired by the softness of the skin and the body, and not just hard robots. The Weiss Institute, based on, for example, butterfly wings for air purification. DNA stores information, so you can do information storage in DNA. Another example of bio-inspired innovation is my own work. So I worked for 4.5 years at the Samsung Advanced Institute of Technology. And most of the scientists at SITE, the Samsung Advanced Institute of Technology, it's the Central Corporate Research Lab, were semiconductor engineers, smartphone engineers, telecommunications engineers. There were almost no biologists. But I was able to do many innovations, interacting with many groups, publishing papers, doing patents and so forth, because I usually brought a biological idea. So I was not the smartest one in the group, but I came up with many innovations because I had a different perspective from biology. So here's one example. The way the human eye or human beings see is very different than the way your smartphone or your computer sees. You'd heard about megapixel cameras. Well, the way a smartphone or a digital camera works is you have a sensor that has pixels, and it senses either light or no light, colors, etc. And that digital signal is sent to the microprocessor, and then an image is computed, and you can have face recognition and image recognition and all that. So you have a sensor, which is either on or off by each pixel, and then you have a computer or microprocessor. Two separate things. That's not how the human eye works. The human eye has a retina, and the retina is the sensor, and then you have the brain, specifically the occipital lobe, which is the processor or the computer. But the retina is not just a sensor, it is a computer in itself. In other words, your eye is already computing the image before it gets to the brain. So it's not like sensor and computing, it is sensor plus computing and computing. So to make a long story short, in this structure, the retina, it is already sensing edges, and it's already sensing motion, and it's not sending pixel data to the brain, it's sending process data to the brain. So when I was at SITE, we created a computationally efficient real-time motion recognition based on bio-inspired visual and cognitive processing. And this is technology that's going into Samsung smartphones to not just have the camera as a sensor device, but also as a computational device to make it much faster and more efficient. Here's another example of innovation that I work with. This is Min-So Kim and myself. We did a trachea-inspired bifurcated microfilter capturing circulating tumor cells. So this is the lung. The lung has two bronchi. And one of the interesting aspects is if one of the bronchi gets blocked, the person does not die right away. You need oxygen because the other lung can also get oxygen. So this is a blockage and the other lung gets oxygen, and then maybe the blockage clears up and so everything is fine. So in these filters that were used to separate out cells, we designed a bifurcated filter, or has these two things just like in the lung, so that if there's a blockage, it can go through the other side here and still function. So the filter doesn't get blocked as easily by having this bifurcated design. Another bio-inspired innovation, I apologize, this is in Korean, but this was a patent that was submitted, and the patent was based on that protein dynamics idea I showed you earlier. If proteins are vibrating, they generate electromagnetic radiation because they have charges. All vibrating charges create electromagnetic radiation. And so there's a specific radiation related to proteins in the terahertz range. And proteins are in living organisms. So this is a patent for automotive radar that, as you know, self-driving cars should be able to pick up living organisms so they avoid them as opposed to some other objects, and be able to differentiate between living objects and non-living objects. So this uses the intrinsic electromagnetic signal from proteins to immediately detect if something is living or not living, so it can make some adjustments and obviously avoid killing people or animals. The current way that automotive radar detects a living person is just by computing that it has two arms and two legs and it looks like a human being. It doesn't actually say it's living, it's just indirectly using artificial intelligence to determine that. But this is an example of a direct determination. So Jeff Bezos with Amazon, what's dangerous is not to evolve. So evolution is very important to innovation. So next week, we're going to talk about history of innovation, talk about Leonardo da Vinci a little bit more, Michelangelo, Galileo, innovation in the ancient world. So innovation in the beginning is not always very pretty. It can be developed, and that's the whole process of evolution, and eventually go to the moon and even Mars shots. So that's our lecture for today. It was a very special day as we started out with those pitches. I'm glad you had a chance to see them. I'm glad that flight won and you had a chance to talk with Dan. And I'm really glad that Mahmoud John has shared that YouTube video. That was very cool. I think that said the central message. Biology is a great model and inspiration for actual ideas as well as how to manage and do innovation. It's a process of evolution. So thanks to my interaction with you, I will include that YouTube video in my lectures from now on. I have evolved this lecture, I have innovated for a more powerful message.